Okay, so we're going to be demonstrating how to use the CDC Wonder site. And I just have gone to wonder.cdc.gov. And I want you to notice that we have 3 tabs here that you can click through to get some different information. So you'll want to explore these data sets. You'll notice we've got a mortality data set that has causes of death across different years. There's some environmental data. If you click on topics, you can see that we've got things like STD surveillance, asthma prevalence. If we click on the A to Z index, you'll see a lot of different types of things in here. We've got cancer, environmental data, again, diabetes prevalence. So there are tons of data sets in here, and I'm just going to show you a couple of examples of what can be done. So we are going to look at, I think, STD for our example. So I'm going to come back to topics and come to STD cases and just go to data request for the most recent data. And each of these data sets is going to have a different way of looking at them, but it's all fairly similar. You're always going to want to group by state if there is an option. And then we're going to do the entire United States plus DC. We're going to get chlamydia rates for the most recent year available, 2014. All genders, rates per 100,000, and we're going to ask for an export of the results. So I will click send, and you'll see it's going to give me a text file. I just need to come up here and do a select all and copy. And then I can come into Excel and just do a quick paste. So now I've got the states and the rates. You'll notice it gives me a count and a population that gets us our rates. For these correlational studies, you really just need the rate. So I'm going to delete these other 2. And I am going to move these over just a few columns because we need to put something ahead of that. Then I'm going to come back to the main Wonder site. And I want to get some behavioral risk factors and look at that correlated to STDs. So I'm going to go into the behavioral risk factor surveillance and look at prevalence and data analysis tools. And unfortunately, the web tool for exporting data is unavailable. So we have to use the prevalence and trends. It's not quite as sophisticated, so we have to do a little bit more massaging of our data. But if you again, here we're going to do the all states in DC. And I'm going to look, here are a bunch of different types of risk factors that you might look at. I'm going to look at alcohol consumption and whether or not people were binge drinking. And then just hit go. And you'll notice that the default is a map here that it's still drawing, but I actually want the table. So I'm going to click on this table guy. And now we've got all of our data for yes and no. Now the hard way to do this would just be to copy all these yeses over into your Excel spreadsheet from the rates. But we can actually export this if you click on the little gear, export CSV file. And this one's gonna open up in Excel for us. And we've got a data set that has a bunch of overall across the country measures that we don't need, so I'm going to delete those. So our first one is Alabama. And then we don't need all of these columns. We just need the state one time. We know the class, we know that we're talking about binge drinking, so we don't need those. We do know whether it's a yes or no. We know the data sort is BRFSS. We know it's a percentage, and we know it's a group prevalence, so I'm going to delete those. So now we get down to, for every state, we have the percentage that said just yes and no. We really just need the yeses, so I'm going to come up into data and choose filter, and it puts these little drop boxes at the top. So I'm going to click on the one for response and ask it to just show me the yeses. So now I've got the states and the percent yes. It's the percentage that said yes to having binge drinking. So I'm going to copy all of these guys. And come back over into my other spreadsheet and just paste those in. So now I don't need the yeses anymore, so I'm going to delete that column. I have a couple of extra columns here that I'm going to delete. Then we just need to come through and make sure all of our states line up. Sometimes there'll be a state with missing data or an extra jurisdiction is thrown in there, so I'm just going through and making sure that everything lines up. Montana, Montana, New Hampshire, New Hampshire. Everything is looking good. Every now and then you'll get an extra one. Ooh, there's some extra ones at the bottom. So we'll delete these territories because we don't have it in both data sets. We can only do a graph for a correlational study if we've got both. So now I only need the state once, so I'm going to delete that column. So now we have state, percent binge drinkers, and the rate per 100,000 of chlamydia. Okay, so we've got our data set to look at a correlation between the rate of chlamydia and the percentage of binge drinkers in each state. So the next thing that I'm going to do is just come up here. First, I'm going to highlight these two columns. So notice I'm only highlighting the columns with the numbers, and I'm including the column headings, the percent binge drinkers and the rate. I'm not highlighting the cells that have the name of the state. Your graph won't look right. So I'm only highlighting these two columns, and I come in and say insert scatter, and then it makes a nice scatter plot for us of the rate per 100,000 of chlamydia versus the percent binge drinkers. So just eyeballing this, we can say that we do see a positive correlation in states that have a higher percentage of people that are binge drinking, there are also higher rates of chlamydia. That would be our interpretation, and then you'd want to walk through the limitations of the study as well for the purposes of turning in your assignment. I'm just going to go back to the Wonder site again. Just show you a couple of other data sets. If you come in here under detailed mortality, you do have to agree to the terms and conditions. You can get a data set for mortality by all sorts of diseases. Again, we're going to group by state. We'll do the entire United States. All kinds of urbanization. We'll do all ages, all genders. You can limit this if you want. Then we'll choose our latest year for our data. All days, all types of values for deaths and places. And then you can explore ICD-10 codes for the types of deaths. So for example, if you clicked on diseases of the circulatory system and said open, it's going to give you all the different types of diseases of the circulatory system. So I could choose pulmonary heart disease and disease of pulmonary circulation. Again, check on export results. Click send. This one also gives me a text file. So I'll just copy that. I'll come over into Excel and paste it. So here you can get, for every state, the crude rate. Again, that's the only column you need. You don't want to use the raw count. You want to use the rates. So we've got our rates of cardiovascular disease. And then you could go look at other risk factors that might relate to that, or look at maybe the relationship between diabetes prevalence and cardiovascular disease. All sorts of things you can do to come up with your own correlational studies here. Alright, so that's it. That's how you do your studies. Explore the data sets. Find some fun ones. You don't necessarily have to have a positive or negative correlation, but it's kind of fun to find one. If you end up not having one, just make sure that you interpret that correctly and still talk about the limitations.